What's up, guys? Hey, Pig! Hey, Pig, why are you streaming on YouTube? Because I can't. I'm streaming on YouTube now. Stop asking me. Stop. Just shut up. I stream on YouTube now. Watch me on YouTube. Stop asking questions. It's better if you don't know. We're watching a video, though. So, there you go. There you go.
On June 21st, 2018, an experienced outdoorsman...
Dude, whoever keeps saying loud equals funny, guys, over and over and over, shut the fuck up. Oh my God, no one cares.
...packed up his two young kids, and they headed out to this beautiful park in Southern California for a fun-filled summer weekend of hiking, camping, and adventure. Little did they know...
Oh, camping. Wow, my favorite types of videos. Chat, you want to know something cool? I'm working on a video right now. Literally... It's going to be called "Why I Hate the Forest," and it's going. I'm putting together like 3 or 4 different missing persons cases and explaining why the forest sucks and why I hate it. I'm actually making an entire video on my main channel about it. It's basically going to be similar to like an iceberg video, but yeah, it's going to be This one is hella sad. That's going to be an epic video. I'll never go to the forest again after that. Yeah, there's some pretty creepy ones. And I tried to find ones that I haven't heard of before because I watch a lot of these videos. So there's a lot that I've heard of. Like when I was searching for them, a lot of them were like, oh, okay, yeah, that one. We've heard of that one before. But I tried to find ones that I haven't heard of. Dance? Are you saying dance? Or are you putting the dance emote? Will there be a sequel with the ocean? If the video does good, then yes, definitely. Because the ocean is probably my second fear. Emotes, fix your shit. I don't know how to do it on Streamlabs. I don't know if Streamlabs has 7TV connected to it. I'll figure it out at some point. I just imagined you just randomly saying, dance. Dance now. Holds gun. Dance. What about camping in the ocean? We'll get, okay, we're moving on, all right? Just wait for the video.
No, there was an evil presence lurking in that park. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you,
I like the strange, dark, and mysterious
MrBallen. Angry emus into their house. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications. So
I have BTTV and 7TV on. Yeah, I know. I'm saying the overlay. Like you see how the chat up here. I don't know how to get 7TV on the overlay chat is what I'm saying. There's a bit of an echo. You're a bit of an echo. Shut up. I fixed it, okay? I figured out why I was doing that. Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry.
Uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
We're Burb? Okay, let me get Shadow.
On the morning of Sunday, June 17th, 2018, 35-year-old Tristan Beaudet pulled his phone out of his pocket to check the weather forecast for Orange County, California. Orange County is this beautiful suburb located right between Los Angeles
I had a vacation there
and San
before.
Diego. And this beautiful
Orange County is just like if Los Angeles wasn't absolute garbage. Orange County's okay. Not the best, though. You can get on my shoulder, you're just going to hang out on my finger.
Suburb is where Tristan and his wife, 36-year-old Erica Wu, and their 2 young daughters, aged 2 and 4, called home. And on this day, which was Father's Day, Tristan had gotten up early to check the weather to make sure it was going to be clear that day because he really wanted to take his family out for a fun beach day to celebrate his holiday. And he was in luck because when his app loaded, it showed that Orange County was going to be beautiful and clear all day. Although, even if the weather had come back as rainy and horrible and cold, Tristan was the kind of person who still would have wanted to go to the beach. Because for Tristan, anything outdoors was really awesome. That was his happy place, being out in nature.
That was his first mistake. See, that right there is his first mistake, is thinking outdoors is like, don't get me wrong. I like the outdoors. I feel like people misunderstand when I say I hate the forest. I like the outdoors. I hate the forest at night, at least. I mean, maybe even during the day. But I like outside. I touch grass, chat.
Throwing a frisbee around outside, he didn't care. If he was outside, he was good with it. And even though his daughters were still very young, they both already had totally fallen in love with nature, just like their dad had, which made Tristan just so happy, because now he had these two little sidekicks
nature,
that would go with him on all his outdoor adventures. As for Tristan's wife, Erica, she did love the outdoors, but maybe not as much as Tristan did. But that was okay with Tristan, because all he would do is make little adjustments to his adventures to make it more bearable for Erica. Like whenever they went camping, Tristan would totally rough it in a tent right on the ground, but he would bring along a big full-size blow-up mattress for his wife. And this was something that Erica just adored about Tristan. Not that he literally
building up the character, you know, making him, giving him a personality, making him a good person, and then boom, he dies horribly.
He didn't judge people. He was at peace with the world. And in fact, it was that character trait that had originally attracted Erica to Tristan. Erica had met Tristan back in high school when some mutual friends had set them up. Tristan didn't have a date to a dance at his school, and so the friends were kind of like, Erica, go with him.
Yes, I always check Discord, but I never really type in it.
And on the night, she actually met Tristan for the first time. She's laying eyes on him for the first time. He was a sight to behold. The summer prior, he had sprouted up like 4 inches or so. So he's super tall, but his body hadn't quite filled out yet. So he's super lanky looking, and he was totally overdressed for this dance. He had on this full tuxedo, and he was not remotely self-conscious.
Okay, Ballen, you got to stop doing this to me. You can't be like, oh, he's the best guy ever, the most kind, wonderful human ever, and he dies horribly to this evil person ripping his body limb from limb. Why do you always have to do this to me? Thank you, Serpent.
He was only psyched to have a date to this dance. And during this dance, Tristan would just totally rock that tuxedo in all of his gangly glory, as if this tuxedo was made for him. And he would really try hard to make sure that Erica had a good time with him. And she totally
stop
did.
making us like him. I hate it. I hate it.
The pair was inseparable. Erica would go on to study at Stanford and would become an OB/GYN doctor. As for Tristan, he would become this wildly successful, widely published scientist with a patent related to vaccine delivery. However, in typical Tristan fashion, he didn't care at all about his resume. It didn't matter that it was completely stacked. I mean, on paper, this guy...
So he's literally the perfect human is what he's going for. He's literally perfect human. I can't wait for him to get ripped limb from limb. Yo, thank you, Catabolic, for the $4.99. 100% support the change. You do you. Hi, Shadow. Shadow says hi back as well. Thank you so much.
Was just unbelievable. Tristan never changed his personality. He never changed anything about himself. In fact, his scientist colleagues who adored him, they used to think it was hysterical that this brilliant chemist who was on the cutting edge of various cancer treatments and all this crazy research, that guy was actually this big mellow type person who wandered around the lab and started most of his sentences with, dude. By early afternoon on that Father's Day in 2018.
That's how I normally start my sentences with dude. YouTube sucks ass though. Who asked?
Erica and Tristan and their 2 little girls had made their way to a local beach.
Every platform sucks ass.
Sitting in a beach chair reading a book, and Tristan and
just
the girls
watch me.
had set up a sunshade right down where the water broke, and they were digging in the sand. And so over the course of that afternoon, Erica, she's reading her book, and periodically she would look up and she would see Tristan and the girls digging in the sand or making sand castles. And then at some point, Tristan and the girls, they would get up and abandon their dig site, and they would run into the water, and then they would run back to shore right as the waves were breaking, trying to kind of escape the waves. And the two little girls thought this was so much fun, and they were laughing hysterically and screeching with excitement as the waves crashed
good
at their
dad,
ankles. These are tiny
perfect
little waves.
human.
And at some
Can we
point,
just
Erica,
get to
she's
his
looking up, watching this,
eventual
and she sees her
demise?
two little girls having a blast, and she sees her husband flash her this big grin because he knows this is totally funny. And at that moment, Erica suddenly felt herself feel something that she didn't always feel these days, and that was just contentedness, happiness.
Why are, like, this is probably the most in-depth character development of a story that I've heard from Ballen before. What is this, man? Like, what is this? Yeah, he's literally edging us for 6 minutes straight, talking about how great this family is, how happy they are, how content they are, how he's like the perfect human. Assholes never die in these stories. Yeah, this is not 1,000 Ways to Die, where every time they explain a story of someone dying, they're always this terrible person, and they always make him out to be a terrible person. So when they die, it's not so depressing. Ballen's the opposite.
Tristan, because
just say he kicks dogs, man. Come on.
He was able to just kind of enjoy life as it came to him. But Erica, she couldn't do that. She was a constant worrier, and that was largely because when she was just 8 years old, she lost her father. And it was this totally traumatic experience that really upset her childhood. It was just devastating for the family. And so ever since then, she had developed this very real paranoia that no matter how good her life was, that at any second it was going to be ruined by something horrible happening to her. But as she sat in this chair, watching her husband,
I feel that paranoia.
Playing with him, it was just this perfect moment. And so Erica would put the book down and she would get up and run into the surf to be with her family. Little did she know, something horrible was about to happen. 4 days later, on June 21st, Erica was...
I will admit, though, that paranoia is detrimental to your happiness. Everyone who has that, like, if things are good and you're sitting there like, oh man, something bad's gonna happen, just don't care. Just enjoy it while it lasts, okay? Just let yourself enjoy shit. Because something bad might happen. And then the entire time you're having paranoia and stress, and then the moment the bad thing happens, you're like, see? I told you, instead of just enjoying what you had.
Was home studying for this big medical exam she was scheduled to take the next day. But at the house with her was her husband and her two little girls. And so the house was totally chaotic and loud, and it was obvious to Tristan as he looked over at his wife that she was really struggling to focus. And Tristan also knew that they were...
Paranoia can also keep you alive. That's different. I'm saying that paranoia of you have a very good life and like shit's going really well for you, but you can't enjoy, you physically can't enjoy that happiness because you're so focused on thinking, oh, this is too good. Something bad is definitely going to happen. So then you just don't enjoy it. You understand what I mean? Obviously, paranoia to an extent is good for your own safety, obviously. I'm talking about just enjoying life. Worrying too much is bad. There, boom.
Were a week away from moving. They were moving to San Francisco. They had just put a deposit down on
yeah,
the house.
too good to be
Some
true
family
shit.
Up there, so it was a smart move to make. But they still had a lot to do for this move. And so Tristan's looking at his wife, knowing that, you know, the stress levels have got to be through the roof for her. And so Tristan decided he would just take the girls and head out for the weekend to make sure Erica had the time and space she needed to prepare for this test, and also just maybe to be alone and have some peace and quiet. So Tristan made a couple of phone calls, and then after he was done, he talked to Erica, and he told her that he had just made reservations at this campsite up in Malibu, California. Malibu is another beautiful Southern California town located about an hour and a half north of Orange County.
So who's worse, YouTube chat or Twitch? Equally bad.
And he tells Erica that he had made reservations in this campground that's out there, and that he had called his brother-in-law named Scott, who had two young kids himself, ages 3 and 5, and they were all going to go there together and spend the weekend at this campsite. Now, Erica was very thankful for her husband for being willing to do this, because she did need the time and space space to study.
Yeah, everyone get
But
prepared. Here
she
comes the bad
immediately
shit.
was just concerned about it because, you know, Tristan, he would take the girls and go out on all sorts of adventures all the time, but he had never gone camping overnight without her there, and so her reaction was to worry about it. But Tristan, who knew his wife very well, told her, "Don't worry, I will take great care of the kids. It's a place that's totally public. It's an amazing campground. There's loads of people around. It's totally safe." And so eventually Erica was convinced. And so Tristan began packing the car with all the camping supplies and the kids' toys and the kids' bikes. And as he's doing that, and the girls are really excited about this camping trip, Erica still found herself thinking, you know, I hope they cancel this trip, because she just couldn't help feeling like something bad was about to happen to them. But Tristan did not cancel the trip, and after the car was all packed and the girls had been tucked into their car seats in the back seat, Tristan kissed Erica goodbye and said he would see her.
I can't imagine how Erica
and
feels
good
now,
luck
dude.
on your test tomorrow. And with that, Tristan hopped into the car. He backed out of the driveway.
Yeah, there's an echo in this video. Is it me? It shouldn't be me. There's only one audio.
And Erica watched as he pulled up the road and headed north towards Malibu. After studying well into the night, Erica finally went to sleep, and then the next morning she got up early because she was nervous about the test, she was anxious about her husband and her kids, and so she's up early and she's getting ready, and as she's getting ready, she hears a loud
it's because of my
knock on the
microphone.
door. She looks at her clock and she sees it's 6:45 in the morning, and there was no reason for anybody to be knocking on her door that early in the morning, maybe unless it was Tristan, but he wouldn't be knocking on the door, he'd just be coming inside. And so apprehensively, she walked out of her room and went to the front of the house, and then she opened the front door. And as soon as she saw who was standing there, she knew something was wrong.
There's a police officer standing there, of course. Yeah, police with the death report.
This video is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Of course. You sly bastard.
Help allows you to talk to your therapist in a private, online, invited messages with your life. I highly suggest ELP.
Chat, you can't blame him on BetterHelp. He's not in the loop. He probably doesn't know, okay? He's not in the loop.
Erica would later reflect on this moment when she opened the door, and even though it didn't make sense and it was irrational, she would sometimes think to herself, what if I had just never opened the door? Would this nightmare have really happened? But Erica did open the door, and standing out there was her sister-in-law, Priscilla, who was there unannounced. She lived an hour and a half away, and she looked very frazzled and upset, and she would give Erica absolutely heartbreaking news. News that was so earth-shattering that Erica literally couldn't comprehend it. Like, this cannot be true. There literally has to be a mistake. But there was no mistake. Erica would not take her medical exam that day. Instead, she would hop into the car with Priscilla and they would drive to Malibu. The day before, Tristan and his two little girls, after driving for about an hour and a half, arrived in Malibu at the entrance to the Malibu Creek State Park. Now, when most people think of Malibu, they just think of the beautiful properties lining the
expensive
beach. They think
properties
of celebrities and rich
and
people
pompous
and exclusivity.
assholes.
And that's all true. But what a lot of people don't know about Malibu is that just outside of the kind of main Malibu area is this totally wild area, this very rugged terrain, all these canyons, all these heavily forested areas. It all kind of butts up against the outside of Malibu. And in this totally rugged
Sharks?
area
Yeah, it was
is
sharks.
where the Malibu Creek State Park is. So Tristan and Scott, they arrive at the gates of this park that leads into this wilderness, and they check in with the park rangers up front, and they are directed to their respective campsites that they had reserved. They had reserved 2 sites right next to each other. And all a campsite is usually is just a square little plot of land with nothing in it, and it's a place where you put your tent on, and sometimes there's a fire pit inside of it. It's really sparse. And so Tristan and Scott, they thank the park ranger, they drive all the way across the campgrounds, they get to their designated spots, and right away Tristan's like, these are just not very good campsites. They were located right near the porta potties, so it kind of smelled bad, and there was lots of foot traffic
Tristan,
right in front
no.
of their sites, and their site was kind of at a tilt too. So just overall, it was not ideal.
I'm guessing he didn't like the site, and then he's like, let's go further out in the woods. That'll be a good idea. Nothing bad will happen here.
deal. And so Tristan said this to Scott, and Scott decided he would just go talk to the park rangers again and see if they could change their campsites. And so he went to the front, talks to the park ranger, and they say, no problem. There's actually 2 open campsites on the other side of the park. We'll just swap your reservation. And so Tristan and Scott and the kids, they make their way to these other 2 campsites, and these are perfect. They're kind of tucked up at the base of this huge canyon. There are no porta potties nearby, so no foot traffic. It's very private, and the land was totally flat. And so the men are totally happy with this, and they start getting their stuff out of their vehicles and setting up their tents, and the kids are running around playing and riding their little bikes around. And then after their campsites were mostly set up, Scott and Tristan made a fire in the fire pit that was located roughly between where the 2 tents had been set up. And so Scott was sleeping with his 2 sons in his tent, and Tristan would be sleeping with his 2 girls in his tent. And so they get this big fire going, and then all the kids and the adults, they sit around the fire, and they start roasting hot dogs and making
some dick.
Yo, Zach S, thank you so much for becoming a little pooper. I appreciate it.
Which is marshmallow, chocolate, and graham cracker, and the dads are telling funny jokes and spooky stories too. And before long, the kids are just totally exhausted, and so Scott and Tristan both take their kids and put them to bed inside of their tents. And then after the kids are tucked in, the 2 men come back to the fire, and Tristan, who had packed pre-made cocktails, he pulls those out and he shares one with Scott. And then the 2 men just enjoyed each other's company, you know, sat around the campfire, chatted for a while. It was mostly
talking about,
Tristan
you know, the wives and stuff.
Talking about his upcoming move to San Francisco, but Scott was happy.
Just bros
listen.
being bros.
And then at some point, the 2 men were just totally exhausted, and they decided it was time for them to go to bed. So they put out the fire. Scott would hug Tristan and tell him that he loved him, and then the 2 men would leave the campfire and go to their respective tents. As Scott climbed into his tent with his 2 sons, he turned and looked out the open flap of his tent across the fire pit towards Tristan's tent. And he saw Tristan climb into the tent with his girls. And so after he sees Tristan get into his tent, Scott zips up his own tent and he lies down, and within 10 or 15 minutes, Scott is fast asleep. Just before sunrise the next day, so around 4:45 a.m., Scott suddenly woke up. He thought he heard a loud sound, but he couldn't place the sound. And so he's just laying there. It's still dark outside. And as he's kind of getting his bearings, he realizes one of Tristan's daughters is crying in her tent. Now, this was not cause for alarm necessarily, because Scott just thought, you know, whatever she was upset about, Tristan would certainly calm her down any minute and she'd be okay. But as Scott was laying there with his 2 sons sleeping right next to him, Tristan's daughter just continued to cry. Now, Tristan was a famously heavy sleeper, and so Scott was thinking, okay, you know, he just must not be awake, and so that's why he's not able to comfort his daughter. And so Scott would carefully get up, he'd unzip his tent, you know, he'd be careful not to step on his sons. He went outside, and outside it's cold, it's dark, he cannot see inside of Tristan's tent. There's no windows on it. And so he just walks over, and by the time he gets to the tent, he can hear clear as day Tristan's daughter is still crying. And so Scott kind of loudly but still whispering says, "Hey, Tristan, wake up." But Tristan doesn't wake up. And so with Tristan's daughter still crying right on the other side of the nylon of this tent, Scott decides to just open the tent up and look inside. And so he walks around to the front of the tent, he unzips the tent, and he looks inside. Now, it's too dark, he can't really tell what he's looking at, but even with the minimal light, he could tell that Tristan was clearly still sleeping right in the middle of the tent, and positioned on either side of him was his 2-year-old daughter and his 4-year-old.
Did a dude just walk by and shoot him?
Daughter, and from the looks of it, the 2-year-old was crying, and the 4-year-old, who was also whimpering, was doing her best to comfort the 2-year-old. And so Scott's looking in, wondering what's going on, when the 2 little girls, they turn and look up at Scott, and when they see him, they just start saying, "Wet, wet, wet." Now, Scott doesn't know what they're talking about. He's starting to get a little bit flustered because he thinks something's wrong, and so he reaches in and just starts shaking Tristan, saying, "Hey, wake up." But as soon as he did that, he could tell Tristan's not sleeping. Tristan is dead, and his 2 little girls are sitting in a pool of his blood. Right before Scott had woken up,
Dear God, man.
someone who was standing near the campsite had fired a gun several times, and one of their bullets went into Tristan's.
Oh, man. This is definitely in America. This is definitely in America. A dude probably drunk as shit Walks outside. Yeah, I feel like going outside, just shooting my gun. Shoot! Just starts shooting everywhere.
His tent and struck him right in the head as he slept next to his daughters. Roughly 2 hours after Tristan was killed.
That is insanely unlucky, man. Oh my God.
Priscilla showed up on Tristan's doorstep to tell his wife, Erica, what happened, that her little girls were about to grow up without a father, just like she did. This news absolutely destroyed Erica. A 42-year-old man named Anthony Rauda would be arrested and charged with Tristan's murder. Rauda had a long criminal history, and at the time of Tristan's murder, he was living illegally in this park up in the canyon nearby.
Then why did he just start shooting a gun?
And when he was arrested, he was in possession of a gun that was ballistically linked to the bullet that killed Tristan. His trial is still ongoing.
But why did... That still doesn't make any sense. Why did he shoot his gun?
Because Rauda keeps firing his defense attorneys, which delays the trial. While Rauda has said he's innocent, he didn't do this, his behavior in court so far has not made him look any more innocent. He has been so violent and erratic during the initial court proceedings that when he goes into court, they have to strap his wrists and his legs into a chair and put what's called a spit hood over his head, which prevents him from spitting on people and biting people. Assuming he was the shooter, that he was responsible for shooting Tristan, which most people believe he was, and there really is an enormous amount of evidence that supports this, but again, his trial is still ongoing. But if we assume he was the shooter, the theory is it was completely random. He did not know Tristan. He basically just fired his gun either intentionally into the tent or recklessly, and he just happened to fire into the tent. But either way, one of his bullets struck Tristan in the head and killed him, meaning Tristan was literally just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if this case wasn't heartbreaking enough, one more distressing detail is that this shooting was not the first shooting in or around this campground. In the year leading up to Tristan's death, there were an astounding 6 other shootings, 2 of which happened literally in the campground right where Tristan was killed. Now, none of these other shootings were fatal, but in all 6 cases, the shooter or shooters were never caught, and the Malibu police just kind of didn't investigate. It wasn't until Tristan got shot and killed in this campground.
Dude, that is legitimately in the video. Okay, in the video that I'm talking about, why I hate forests, that is one of the reasons. They are not managed well, and like, it's not policed, basically. Like, it's basically international waters, man. Like, there are so many different crimes that happen in the forest, and they just don't do anything about it.
That the stories of all these other shootings that never got solved came out, and people are looking on a map saying, wait a minute, there's all these shootings unsolved with a rogue shooter or shooters out and about right
it's because they just don't look for it, man. They don't care.
Here, right over this campground, and we haven't shut down the campground, and we haven't told the public that there's potentially a uncaught shooter roaming around this campground. Why is that? Now, the answers to those questions we don't know now, but they will likely come out during Anthony.
I love the forest. Cool.
Rauda's trial, where he's being charged not only with killing Tristan, but also for all of those other shootings. In the meantime, Erica has filed a $90 million lawsuit against several agencies, saying that her husband had no idea there was this threat of an uncaught shooter at that campground, and had authorities put any sort of warning up, Tristan never would have taken his kids inside of that park, and he would be alive today.
Yep.
Her lawsuit is still ongoing.
Forest in the day, good. Forest at night, bad. That's my thought process.
Now it's time to walk away. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Did you laugh or cry or maybe subscribed? I'll thank you either way. You know I will miss you. Hope you return. Tell your friend or your mother to get me more views, please.